There is a dog lying on a cloud somewhere in the land of Oo. He is not asleep. He is not exactly awake either. He is doing that specific thing he does where he simply exists with total and complete comfort in the present moment. His body soft and golden. His eyes half-lidded. His tail doing that slow curl it does when nothing in the world is wrong and nothing in the world needs to be fixed. Below him, the land of Oo stretches out in every direction. The Candy Kingdom gleaming pink on the horizon. The dark mouth of the Ice Kingdom glinting further north. The green hills rolling out like a dream someone decided to make permanent. He can hear Finn somewhere below. Something about a dungeon. Something about a really cool sword. And Jake will get up and help in a minute. He will. He just wants to feel this cloud for a little bit longer. This is Jake the dog. And if you spend any time with him at all, you are going to find out something strange and something wonderful in equal measure. He is, on the surface, exactly what he looks like. A short, stout, yellow dog with big eyes and a long tail, and a voice that sounds like it belongs to someone who has just finished eating something very satisfying. He is goofy. He is relaxed to a degree that sometimes crosses into irresponsible. He will occasionally give you advice that is so wrong, it loops all the way around and becomes right. He likes bacon pancakes. He loves his family with the quiet constancy of someone who has never once doubted that love is the most important thing in any room. But underneath all of that, underneath the laziness and the jokes and the napping, there is one of the most genuinely fascinating characters that Adventure Time ever gave us. A character whose origin story involves extraterrestrial biology and a wound on his father's head. A character whose powers represent something philosophically interesting about identity and flexibility and what it means to be yourself when yourself is technically infinite shapes. A character who faces death with such serenity that the people around him are more afraid of it than he is. A character who becomes a father and then has to figure out what fatherhood even means when your children grow up faster than your emotional readiness can keep pace with. A character who discovers, halfway through the series, that the thing he thought he understood most about himself, where he came from, what he was made of, was only half the story. Jake the dog is Adventure Time's secret depth charge. He sits in the middle of every scene and radiates calm, and it is so easy to focus on Finn's energy and Marceline's complexity, and Princess Bubblegum's ambition that you almost miss it. You almost miss the way Jake is quietly, consistently wise, the way his jokes contain philosophy, the way his laziness is not apathy but something much closer to a practiced, deliberate acceptance of what is. The way he loves people. Finn, Lady, his pups, his brother Jermaine, even strangers he meets for 11 minutes, with a fullness that never seems to cost him anything, because he has figured out that love is not a finite resource and spending it does not leave you with less. This is his entire story, all of it. From the moment he literally burst into the world from a wound on his father's forehead, to the moment he floated up to the 50th dead world and found a peace so complete that the only thing that could bring him back down from it was sensing that Finn's vibe was off. So get comfortable. Let something soft happen to your shoulders. Because Jake the dog has a lot of story to tell, and it is one of the best ones in Adventure Time. If you are watching this from somewhere in the world right now, whether it is 2 in the morning in your bedroom with the lights low or an afternoon on a couch in some city that is buzzing outside your window, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is a good time. There is a lot of story left, and you are going to want to be comfortable for it. Part 1. The strangest birth in the history of Oo. Every story has a beginning, but very few beginnings are quite as cosmically strange and surprisingly funny as the one belonging to Jake the dog. To understand where Jake comes from, you have to go back to a time before Jake existed at all. Back to the days when 2 extremely capable, extremely devoted detective dogs named Joshua and Margaret were running a small investigations firm out of what can only be described as an impressively well-equipped headquarters somewhere in the land of Oo. Joshua and Margaret were not ordinary dogs. They were investigators of the supernatural and strange, the kind of couple who responded to reports of missing pies and shape-shifting creatures, Not with skepticism, but with loaded crossbows and a healthy respect for the fact that the land of Ooh was full of things that genuinely wanted to eat you. When the story of Jake's birth begins, Margaret is pregnant. Heavily, obviously visibly pregnant, in that way that seems to defy all logic for someone who is also still actively crouching in bushes and hunting monsters, which she absolutely is. Joshua, to his credit, is trying to be protective without being condescending about it. He is trying to steer them toward less dangerous cases. So when a report comes in about pies being stolen near Tree Trunk's property, Masai, the kind of low-stakes neighborhood nuisance that does not usually require anyone to risk their life, Joshua figures this is the one. This is the safe assignment. Let Margaret come along for this one. It is just stolen pies. It is not just stolen pies. What Joshua and Margaret find in those woods is a shape-shifting creature unlike anything they have encountered before. Not a simple ooh monster. Not some stray magical beast that wandered too close to civilization. This thing is something else. Something older and stranger, something that exists outside the normal categories, something that can shift its form so completely and so fluidly that it is almost more like an idea of a creature than a creature itself. It is blue-skinned and multi-eyed, and it moves through shapes the way water moves through a hand. Not held by any of them, not committed to any of them, passing through form after form after form. And it bites Joshua. Not a scratch, not a warning nip. It bites him on the head, hard and deliberate, and when it is done, it opens a portal and disappears. Joshua starts feeling ill immediately. Whatever venom this creature carries, it works fast. A lump begins to form on the top of his head, a swelling that pulses with a life of its own, that grows not slowly but with a kind of terrible intention, as if something inside it has places to be. Margaret, because she is exactly the kind of person who does not panic when panicking would be the reasonable response, sets out to find the creature again. Not to chase it, not even to hurt it. She needs its venom to make an antidote for Joshua. She tracks it down, she extracts what she needs, she comes back. And while all of this is happening, while Margaret is racing through the dark with antidote ingredients, and Joshua is suffering the effects of whatever alien biology is happening inside his body, something extraordinary occurs. Margaret goes into labor, and simultaneously, so does the lump on Joshua's head. These two things happen at roughly the same moment, in the kind of cosmically synchronized way that Adventure Time absolutely loves. And what emerges from Joshua's forehead is not, as you might expect, something monstrous or alarming or disturbing in the way that the story has been building toward. What emerges is a puppy, a small, round, yellow puppy who appears to be in an excellent mood about the whole situation. He sings a brief little song, he dances a few steps, then he falls immediately back to sleep, apparently satisfied that his arrival has been acknowledged. Joshua and Margaret look at each other. The antidote is made. Germain, their natural-born son, arrives moments later from the more conventional direction. And just like that, they have two children, Joshua and Margaret, who are made of tougher emotional material than most, make a decision that seems sensible at the time. They will not tell Jake where he came from. They will not explain the specifics of his birth. They will raise him as their own, which he is, not in spite of the strange circumstances, but simply because they love him, because love does not actually require conventional origins, because a family is a family when the people in it decide to be one. This is important. Hold it for a moment. Because what Joshua and Margaret do, choosing Jake completely, raising him without reservation, giving him the same love and the same expectations and the same high-quality Joshua-style mentorship as they gave Germain, this is one of the first and most important things the show tells us about what family means. It does not mean matching genetics. It does not mean conventional origin stories. It means choosing. It means showing up. It means the hat on Joshua's head covering the scar and the whole wild truth of it, and still, always, being dad. Adventure Time is subtle about a lot of things, but the subtlety here is particularly deliberate. Because the episode Joshua and Margaret Investigations is framed as a birthday story. It is Jake's birthday at the top of the episode, and Finn and BMO ask Jake to tell them about how he was born. And the framing device of the episode implies throughout that we are watching Jake narrate the past, that this is the story as Jake knows it. But then, at the very end, a quiet revelation lands. Joshua and Margaret, having processed the impossible events of that night, agree to never tell anyone what actually happened. Not even Jake. The agreement is their private pact, and it is shown to the audience without being resolved for the characters. Jake does not know that he just narrated his own origin story. He does not know that the story of the shapeshifter and the bite and the lump on his father's head is his story. He thinks he got his powers from a magic mud puddle. This is genuinely one of the most beautiful and quietly tragic pieces of storytelling in the series. Not because the secret is malicious. Joshua and Margaret are not trying to hurt Jake or deceive him out of cruelty. They are trying to protect him from the weight of a truth that is genuinely strange and might be painful. But there's also something fundamentally human, or in this case, fundamentally dog, about the impulse to give your child a simpler story than the real one. To let them live inside a gentler version of their own beginning for as long as they can. To wrap them in an origin that feels manageable. And Jake, for decades, lives inside that simpler story. He believes the mud puddle. It explains the powers in a way that feels right, a bit silly, a bit lucky, the kind of explanation that fits a being who does not take himself too seriously. He is a magical dog because he rolled around in something magical. That tracks. That is the kind of story Jake tells about himself, because Jake is fundamentally uninterested in grand narratives of destiny and biological specialness. He is who he is because of what he does, not because of what he came from. The truth, when it eventually surfaces, does not destroy that. And that tells you something profound about how deeply Jake has been shaped by his actual upbringing rather than his biological inheritance. He finds out he is half-alien shape-shifting entity with extraterrestrial origins, and the knowledge does not reorganize him. It does not rewrite the person he is, because the person he is was built by Joshua, pushing him to be tough, and Margaret nurturing him through that toughness, and Jermaine being the brother right beside him, and Finn being the brother who showed up later, and became the whole shape of his adult life. That is who made Jake. Not Warren Ampersand. Not the venom. Not the biology. That is the argument Adventure Time makes with Jake's entire arc. And it makes it quietly, without speeches, just by showing you who Jake is across hundreds of episodes, and then showing you the truth about his origins, and trusting you to feel how little the revelation actually changes him. What they decide not to tell Jake is that he is half something else. Half the shape-shifting alien creature that bit Joshua in that dark forest. Half extra-dimensional biology. Half powers that have nothing to do with being a dog and everything to do with whatever ancient alien DNA was transmitted through that bite. Jake, for his part, will spend decades thinking his stretchy powers came from rolling around in a magical mud puddle when he was a puppy. Which is such a fundamentally Jake explanation for a thing that it almost deserves to be true. It is not true. The truth is stranger and more interesting, and will come back to reshape everything he thinks he knows about himself when the show is ready to unfold it. But for now, in those early days, Jake is just a puppy. A puppy with a warm home and a brother and two parents who love him absolutely, growing up in a household built on adventure and toughness, and the expectation that you will be capable of handling the world. Joshua, in particular, is the kind of father who believes that difficulty builds character, that challenges are gifts, that his sons should be pushed, should be tested, should emerge from their childhoods knowing how to handle things. Margaret is the balance to this, softer, warmer, more inclined to protection, where Joshua inclines toward pressure. Between them, Jake grows up knowing something that will serve him for the rest of his life, through every strange thing that happens to him, through every identity crisis and cosmic revelation, and grief and joy and transformation. He knows that he is loved, not as a feeling that fluctuates, not as something that needs to be earned or maintained or proven, just as a fact, as a condition of his existence. He is loved. Full stop. This turns out to be a more profound gift than any amount of wealth or power or knowledge could ever be. Part 2. A Life Before the Treehouse. The Criminal Years. At some point after Joshua and Margaret pass on, and the show is deliberately quiet about exactly when and how this happens, in the way that Adventure Time is often quiet about things that would hurt too much to say outright, Jake and Finn move into the treehouse together. Jermaine stays at the family home, maintaining it, taking on the weight of their parents' legacy in the way that Jermaine does, with a kind of dutiful heaviness that Jake never really quite fully appreciated for a long time. But before the treehouse, before Finn, before the life of adventuring and heroics that defines what we know of Jake, there is a chapter in his story that is not exactly heroic. Jake the dog, magical and stretchy and fundamentally good-natured, was for a period of his life a criminal. Not a minor criminal. Not someone who swiped a few apples from a market stall or jaywalked through the Candy Kingdom. A real one. The kind with a crew, with a reputation, with specific skills that he had developed and refined for the express purpose of taking things that did not belong to him. The show drops hints about this across several episodes without ever making it the focus. References to his gang, to past jobs, to a criminal record that other characters occasionally acknowledge with a kind of careful acknowledgement. Like they know the information is there, but they are choosing not to make a whole thing out of it. In the episode called One Last Job, this past gets excavated properly. Jake is forced to reassemble his old crew, Gareth, the Flying Lettuce Brothers, and Tiffany, to pull off a heist that will save Jake Jr., his daughter, who has been kidnapped. Or so it appears. The truth is more complicated. Jake Jr. has staged her own kidnapping specifically to get her father to do the thing she always wanted to see him do. To prove to himself and to her that the person he used to be is still in there somewhere. That the skills are still sharp. That the past does not disappear just because you have decided to be different. It is a fascinating episode partly because of what it tells us about Jake's relationship with who he used to be. He is not ashamed of it exactly. He is also not proud of it. He exists in that complicated middle space that adults occupy when they think about things they did before they grew into themselves. Aware that those things happened, aware that they were wrong, aware also that they were formative, that the person who did them was still them, that you cannot fully excise the past without excising the part of yourself that learned from it. Jake knows how to plan a heist because he planned real ones. He knows how to move through a space undetected because he did it for real, for years, with real consequences on the line. What changed? The honest answer is probably Finn. Or more accurately, what Finn represents. The possibility of a life directed outward instead of inward. A life organized around helping rather than taking. A life that uses the same skills, the same cleverness, the same ability to adapt and improvise, but turns those capacities towards something that actually leaves the world better than it found it. The adventuring life suits Jake not because it is safer or simpler than the criminal one, but because it gives all that energy somewhere meaningful to go. There is also, and this matters, the family. When Jake becomes a father, something shifts in how he relates to his own past. The recklessness that was fun when it was just him and Finn becomes harder to justify when there are 5 small faces looking up at him. The criminal skill set, the old contacts, the ability to run a job. These things are still there, still usable, but they carry different weight now. They are not something he is particularly eager to show his kids. Except when his kid is in danger, at which point he uses every single one of those old tools without hesitation and without apology, because that is also what it means to be a parent. You use what you have. The show never judges Jake for this history. It does not treat the criminal past as a dark secret to be overcome or a weakness to be ashamed of. It treats it as part of who he is, part of how he became the person he is. The street knowledge, the understanding of how people operate when they are not on their best behavior, the lack of naivety about how the world actually works. These things make Jake more capable as a hero, not less. They give him a texture and a realism that pure goodness cannot always provide. He is not good because he has never done anything bad. He is good because he has done things that were not good and chose at some point to do better. That is a different kind of goodness entirely. It is also worth noting that even during his criminal years, the show implies that Jake was not violent. He was a thief, a clever one. Someone who figured out how to get what he wanted through cunning and flexibility. which is so deeply in character for a shapeshifter that it almost seems inevitable. He was not cruel. He was not a threat to people who did not have what he wanted. He was operating in the moral gray area that the land of Ooh is full of, doing what it took to survive and thrive in a post-apocalyptic world that is, when you look at it squarely, not exactly overflowing with legitimate employment opportunities for magical dogs with unusual abilities. The criminal past is not the point of Jake's story, but it is part of it. And the show is honest about that in a way that gives the character a grounded credibility that would otherwise be missing. Jake is not a saint who adventured his way into goodness. He is a person, a magical dog person, who made choices, some of them wrong, some of them right, and arrived at who he is now through the accumulation of all of them. This history also gives Jake something that purely virtuous characters rarely have: the ability to understand people who are not virtuous. He is not naive about the motivations of thieves and cons and manipulators, because he has been in those spaces. He has operated with that logic. When someone approaches Finn and Jake with an angle, Jake is frequently the one who notices the angle while Finn is still processing the surface presentation. Not because Jake is cynical, he is not, but because he is fluent in a language that earnest heroism does not teach you. He knows how the game works, and knowing how it works means being harder to deceive by it. There is also something worth noting about the specific shape of Jake's criminal career. The show never portrays it as deeply scarring. He does not have the emotional injuries of someone who was forced into a life of crime by desperate circumstances. He seems, insofar as the show addresses this at all, to have been in it willingly, to have been good at it, and to have left it when he found something better to do with himself. This is important because it means that his goodness now is genuinely chosen. He is not good because he was born good or because he was afraid not to be or because he never had access to any other option. He was doing something else and he decided to stop. He chose the life of adventuring and helping and being present for his family, not as an escape from anything but as an affirmative selection. This is the life I want. This is who I want to be. That kind of chosen goodness has a different quality than inherited goodness. It has weight to it. It has the solidity of a decision rather than the lightness of a default. Jake knows what the alternative feels like, and every day that he wakes up in the treehouse and makes breakfast and waits for Finn to come running down the stairs, yelling about some new crisis, he is making the choice again. The choice to be here. The choice to be this. In the land of Ooh, moral histories are complicated for everyone. Princess Bubblegum has done things in the name of the Candy Kingdom that shade from benevolent ruler into something considerably darker. Marceline carries centuries of moral ambiguity that she is still sorting through. Even Finn, the show's most purely heroic protagonist, makes decisions across the series that he has to sit with, reconsider, live with the consequences of. Ooh is not a world of clean heroes and clear villains. The Lich is probably the closest thing to a purely evil entity the show has. And even the Lich comes with enough cosmic context to function as something more like a force of nature than a simple bad guy. Jake fits into this perfectly. He is good. He is genuinely, consistently good in the ways that matter most. But he is good the way that people who have actually lived are good. Not without complication, not without history, not without the occasional moment where you can see the old shape of him underneath the current one, where the criminal cleverness shows through the heroic exterior and does something useful with it. His gang, when reassembled in one last job, are characterized with surprising affection. Gareth, the Flying Lettuce Brothers, Tiffany. These are not just plot devices. They are people Jake worked with, knows, has complicated history with. He is not apologetic about knowing them. He is not performing discomfort about reactivating old skills. He pulls the crew together with the casual confidence of someone who has done it before and could do it again if necessary. And the job is pulled off with exactly the kind of style and competence that comes from real experience. Jake Jr. is watching. She wanted to see this. She wanted her father to do the thing that nobody talks about but everybody knows is part of who he is. And what Jake understands in the episode's final beats is that his daughter was not asking him to be proud of the criminal past. She was asking him to be honest about it, to not pretend it did not happen, to let her see the whole person, not just the approved version. He can do that. Of course he can. He is Jake. He is never not the whole person. Part 3, Finn and Jake, the architecture of brotherhood. Before we go any further into the specific events of Jake's life, we have to talk about the single most important relationship in it. Not Lady Rainicorn, though that relationship is profound and we will get there. Not Joshua and Margaret, though their influence runs through everything Jake does and is. Not his children, though being their father reshapes him in ways he could not have anticipated. Finn. It always comes back to Finn. Jake and Finn are brothers. Adoptive brothers, technically. When Joshua and Margaret found a human baby abandoned in the woods, they brought him home and raised him alongside Jake and Jermaine, which tells you everything you need to know about who Joshua and Margaret were as people. And what grew between Jake and this small human boy was something that has very few good comparisons in animated television, because it is not the simple bond of best friends, and it is not the complicated politics of biological siblings, and it is not the mentor-student relationship, though it is a little of all of those things. It is something more specific than any of those categories. Jake and Finn are the same person expressed in two different modes. Finn is energy, urgency, passion, the desperate need to be good and to be seen being good and to prove through constant action that he is worthy of the world he was given. Jake is ease, acceptance, the quiet confidence of someone who has already made his peace with most of the things Finn is still wrestling with. Together, they cover the full spectrum of what it means to be alive and trying. They are each other's counterweight. Finn without Jake would fly apart. Jake without Finn would drift too easily into comfortable stagnation. What makes this relationship specifically Jake's story, and not just the story of both of them, is the directionality of his care. Jake loves Finn with an intensity that he works very hard to make look casual, because Jake works hard to make everything look casual. But watch what he actually does. He goes to Mars to be with Finn when Finn is going to sacrifice himself. He pulls himself together during every moment of crisis, not because he is not affected, but because Finn needs him not to fall apart. He gives advice, sometimes bad advice, sometimes advice so sideways that it requires Finn to work out the right answer by contrast. But he gives it consistently, persistently, because he has decided that his job in this relationship is to be a steady presence, and he does that job with a professionalism that his general vibe totally disguises. There is a moment in the episode called The New Frontier that says more about how Jake feels about Finn than almost anything else in the series. Jake has had a prophetic dream, a croak dream in Ooze terminology. A dream featuring the cosmic owl, which means, in Adventure Time's mythology, that the dream will come true. The dream shows Jake's death. And what is remarkable, what is genuinely extraordinary about Jake's response to this, is that he is fine with it. Not brave-facing it, not pretending to be fine while secretly terrified, genuinely philosophically fine with the idea of dying. He has made his peace with mortality in a way that is actually quite beautiful and quite rare. He tells Finn with real warmth and no performance of courage that it is okay, that everything ends, that this is just how it goes. Finn, who is still young enough to rage against mortality in the way that youth rages against it, is devastated. Not for Jake's sake. Jake seems barely troubled. For his own sake. For the specific unbearability of a world without Jake in it. And when Jake says near the end of that episode, "Take care of yourself," "You were not beside me in my croak dream, but I am glad you are here now." Finn hears something in that and realizes that maybe the croak dream can be avoided precisely because Finn was not in it. Maybe the way out is for Finn to stay so close to Jake that the dream cannot come true. And the episode ends with them running together, Jake pretending to escape and Finn chasing him, both of them laughing. The crisis deferred not by solving it, but by refusing to let each other out of reach. That is what their relationship is, that running, that refusal of absence, that willingness to be ridiculous together as an alternative to being apart. Something that is easy to miss about the Finn and Jake dynamic is how much Jake understands Finn. Not just likes, not just tolerates, but genuinely understands in the way of someone who has watched a person grow up and paid attention the entire time. He knows Finn's patterns. He knows the specific shape of Finn's pride and the specific shape of Finn's insecurity. He knows that Finn needs to feel heroic, not just to feel good about himself, but because heroism is the framework through which Finn organizes his entire sense of purpose. And when that framework gets disrupted, when Finn fails, when Finn does something unkind, when Finn makes a choice that does not fit the heroic self-image, it does not just make Finn feel bad, it threatens the entire structure of who Finn understands himself to be. Jake knows this, and he is remarkably careful with it without being precious about it. He does not wrap Finn in cotton wool. He does not pretend failures are not failures or mistakes are not mistakes. But he frames things in ways that preserve Finn's dignity even while requiring accountability. He is the older sibling version of a good coach, someone who can push you harder than anyone else because you trust completely that the pushing is in service of you rather than in service of the pusher's ego. The advice Jake gives Finn about relationships is particularly worth spending time with. It is famously inconsistent. Jake's theory of love, as expressed to Finn across many seasons, involves a tier system for romantic relationships, a graduated set of expectations for what various levels of physical and emotional closeness mean, that is so specific and so confidently stated that it feels like it must be wisdom, but frequently turns out to be Jake's very particular experience with Lady Rainicorn mapped onto every possible romantic situation Finn might be in. Which does not always work. Princess Bubblegum is not Lady Rainicorn. Flame Princess is definitely not Lady Rainicorn. These relationships require different things than the tier system provides, and Finn has to sort that out on his own while Jake watches with benevolent confidence that it will all work out. And yet, there is something in Jake's relationship advice that is consistently right even when the specific content is wrong. The thing that is consistently right is the underlying message. Finn, you deserve to be loved, and you are capable of loving someone well. You are not broken. You are not doing this wrong on some fundamental level. You are figuring it out like everyone figures it out, imperfectly, with setbacks, by trying things that do not work and learning from them. Keep going. Jake has never once, across the entire run of the series, implied that Finn is not worthy of the love he is looking for. He has never suggested that Finn's failures in romance are evidence of something permanently defective about him. He loves Finn with the kind of unconditional consistency that makes Finn's self-doubt coexist with an unshakable baseline of self-worth. You can see it in how Finn carries himself. How even in moments of profound grief or loss or failure, he does not break. He bends. He rights himself. He keeps going. This is not just Finn's natural resilience. It is what years of being loved without conditions does to a person. Jake's advice to Finn on other topics follows a similar pattern. On courage. Jake models a kind of courage that is not loud. He does not need to narrate his own bravery. He just does what needs doing, usually with a joke, usually while looking like he is barely paying attention. And then it turns out he was paying attention the whole time and he did the right thing. On purpose. Jake has never seemed to struggle with the question of what he is for in the way that Finn sometimes struggles with it. His purpose is immediate and relational. He is here for Finn, for Lady, for his kids, for the adventure that is in front of him right now. The cosmic scale of purpose does not appeal to Jake partly because it requires the kind of abstraction that his mind does not reach for naturally, and partly because he has figured out that the immediate scale is enough. More than enough. The person in front of you is enough to organize your day around. There is one episode that captures the Finn and Jake relationship in its fullest and most honest form, and it is called James Baxter, the Horse. It is on the surface about a horse who bounces on a beach ball and says his own name and makes people happy just by existing. Jake and Finn spend the episode trying to find out if they can do what James Baxter does, if they can be that kind of source of pure comfort and joy for the people around them. They fail in the specific way of the episode. But the attempt is the point. The attempt to ask, what is the impact of our existence on the people around us? Are we making things better just by being here? Are we, in our own way, the thing that someone needs to see to feel okay? Jake, in the context of Finn's life, is James Baxter. He does not bounce on a ball. He does not do anything particularly spectacular most of the time. But his presence, his warmth and his ease and his consistent being here makes Finn's world workable in a way it would not be without him. Finn says as much across the series in the ways he panics when Jake is threatened, in the way he absolutely refuses to accept a world without Jake in it, in the way he memorizes a clapping signal in Season 3 specifically for the scenario in which they both end up dead and need to find each other in the afterlife. That level of preparation for even the most outlandish contingencies is love spoken in Finn's native language. And Jake receives it the same way he receives everything, with warmth and without making a big deal of it, and with a deep, quiet certainty that this is simply how things are supposed to be. Jake's advice to Finn on courage in ways that are actually just Jake saying, "I believe in you," wearing the costume of practical guidance. He fails to advise Finn in moments when advice would have been genuinely useful, because sometimes he gets distracted by food or naps, or a cool idea he just had, and Finn has to sort things out without him. But here's the thing about Jake's apparent failures as an advisor. They are often not failures at all. They are invitations. When Jake gives deliberately bad advice or no advice at all, he is sometimes creating the conditions under which Finn has to think for himself, work things out for himself, develop his own judgment. Not because Jake is some deliberate Socratic pedagogue. He absolutely is not. He is a dog who also just sometimes gets distracted. But because the pattern of their relationship turns even Jake's absences into growth opportunities for Finn. That is how deeply they are shaped by each other. Even the gaps are formative. As the series progresses and both of them grow, the relationship shifts. Finn gets older and more complex, carrying heavier emotional weight, navigating loss and identity, and the specific grief of growing up in a world that does not hold still. Jake stays warmer, calmer, more settled in himself. The asymmetry that always existed between them, older, wiser Jake, younger, more volatile Finn, becomes more pronounced in some ways and less in others. Finn catches up to Jake's wisdom on some fronts. Jake falls behind Finn's emotional complexity on others. They both change. The relationship changes around them. But it never, not once in the entire run of the series, stops being the thing at the center of both their lives. Their treehouse is the physical expression of this. Two beings sharing a single home. Two beds, two sets of adventures, two sets of feelings, one roof. The treehouse gets destroyed at the end of the series, which is devastating in the way that losing a family home is always devastating. But by then, both of them have grown enough that what they carry forward does not require four walls and a roof. What they carry is each other. And that, it turns out, survives everything. Even death. Part 4. What it means to be made of infinite shapes. Jake's powers. Jake's stretchy powers are funny. They are used for comedy constantly throughout the show. Jake turning himself into a boat. Jake becoming a giant so that Finn can ride him across a landscape. Jake stretching his face into outrageous expressions. Jake morphing into a key to pick locks. Jake forming his whole body into a bow to fire arrows. Jake turning himself into a comfortable chair and then a table, and then whatever the situation needs him to be. The humor is so ever-present, so reliably delivered, that it is easy to miss what the powers actually are. They are a representation of identity itself. Think about what it means to be able to take any shape, to have no fixed form, to be able to become whatever the moment requires. In the hands of a less thoughtful show, this would just be a cool power. A convenient plot device. A way to get Finn and Jake out of situations that would otherwise be impossible. And yes, it is all of those things. But Adventure Time is always doing something more than what it appears to be doing, and Jake's powers are one of the places where that extra layer is most consistently present. The philosophical tradition that Jake most closely resembles is Stoicism. The show is not shy about this. The Adventure Time wiki literally notes that Jake's behavior in the episode Puhoi is a direct reference to the third aphorism of Epictetus's Enchiridion, written around 135 AD. When Finn is catastrophizing about a relationship problem, Jake picks up his favorite cup and throws it out the window. He explains with total calm that the cup is no longer real to him. He does not have it. Therefore, he does not care about it. Therefore, it cannot hurt him. This is the Stoic idea that it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about things. The cup only had power over Jake because he valued it. Remove the valuation and the power is gone. It is a doctrine of radical mental autonomy, the idea that the only truly free space is the interior of your own mind, and that wisdom consists of figuring out what you can and cannot control and caring accordingly. Jake's stretchy powers are the physical version of this philosophy. Because he can take any shape, no single shape has power over him. Because he can become anything, nothing threatens to lock him into a fixed identity. He is flexible not just physically, but emotionally, morally, philosophically. Things roll off him in the way that insults roll off someone who does not need external validation. Challenges bounce off him in the way that difficulties bounce off someone who has accepted that difficulty is a constant feature of existence, rather than an unusual imposition on it. This is why, in the episode Jake the Brick, he can spend an extended period of time literally being a brick. Just existing as a structural component in a wall that is slowly collapsing. Watching the small ecology around him, a rabbit, some beavers, a family of deer, go through cycles of struggle and adaptation and small triumphs and loss. Just watching, just being present, not needing the watching to go anywhere or mean anything or result in a lesson he can take back to Finn. Just being in the moment, fully and completely, without agenda. The episode won a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Short Format Animated Program because it is genuinely extraordinary. What looks like an episode where nothing happens is actually one of the most profound meditations on presence and attention and the value of simply existing, alongside the world's small stories without trying to change them. Jake broadcasts his observations on Finn's improvised radio station, and every character in OO stops what they are doing to listen. Because what Jake is doing, narrating the life of a rabbit trying to keep its home together as the season changes, is grounding in the exact way that presence is grounding. He is not doing anything special. He is paying attention. He is bearing witness. He is there. The stretchy powers also serve as a kind of external measure of Jake's interior state. When he is comfortable, when he is at ease, his powers work smoothly and easily. When something is wrong, when he is in denial or afraid or struggling with something he has not fully processed, his powers begin to act up. They do things he did not tell them to do. They reflect his subconscious. This becomes especially important later in the series when his true nature begins to emerge, and his body starts making changes that his conscious mind is not prepared to acknowledge. There is also a physical reality to the powers that the show takes seriously. Jake's mass is conserved. When he gets very large, he gets very thin. When he overstretches, he puts his organs at genuine risk because the material of his body, however flexible, is still finite. He can die from overstretching. This is not a theoretical risk, it is a real one. And it means that his easy, casual use of the powers is also a kind of ongoing trust in himself, a daily act of self-knowledge, of understanding how far he can go before the elasticity runs out. He does not always know the full extent of what he can do. Pendleton Ward stated in an interview that Jake uses his powers lazily and does not know their full extent. Which is so perfectly Jake. He has access to this extraordinary, possibly limitless capability, and he uses it to make a boat when Finn wants to cross a river, to make a comfortable chair when there is nowhere to sit, to pick a lock when they need to get into a dungeon. The extraordinary made ordinary, the cosmic made domestic, the infinite contained in the immediate need. But in the finale, when everything is on the line and GOLB is attacking, and Finn and Simon are trapped inside the chaos deity's body, Jake stretches himself to an enormous scale to amplify the sound of their friends' voices, using his power not as a weapon, not as a transportation method, not as a joke, but as a speaker, a resonator, a way to make music louder so it can defeat an ancient god. It is the most Jake possible use of the most Jake possible power. And it works. There is one more layer to the stretchy powers that the show builds toward carefully, and which becomes one of the most emotionally satisfying payoffs in Jake's arc. For most of the series, Jake treats his powers as tools. Things he has, things he uses. He is not particularly interested in their origins or their limits, because he is not fundamentally a person who finds abstract questions about capability and origin interesting. He is interested in what is in front of him. The powers are in front of him and they work, so he uses them. But in the episodes that deal with his true form, the blue, multi-eyed, winged alien that emerges when his biological nature surfaces, the powers become a mirror. They show him something about himself that purely physical reflection cannot. They reveal the shape of what he is underneath the shapes he chooses. And what he has to work out through the episode Abstract and through the quiet integration of the Warren ampersand revelation is whether that deeper shape is something to be afraid of or something to be accepted. He accepts it. Of course he accepts it. Because the alternative, spending energy resisting what you actually are, is the least Jake thing imaginable. He has never spent energy resisting anything except injustice, and that is different. That is worth spending energy on. But resisting the shape of your own nature? That is like fighting the water you are made of. It is exhausting and pointless, and the water is going to be there either way. So he accepts the alien shape and the dog shape and all the infinite shapes in between. And his powers become what they were always meant to be, not a single capability, but a kind of fundamental truth about him. He is the being who can be anything, who is never fixed, who can stretch into whatever the moment needs without losing himself in the stretching, who comes back to his comfortable yellow dog form not because that form is more real than the others, but because it is the one that feels most like home, and home is worth returning to, even when you have been somewhere extraordinary. When Jake uses his key hand to pick a lock, there is something almost contemplative about it. He grows a single finger into the precise shape needed, inserts it, works the mechanism, and the door opens. He does not celebrate this. He does not remark on how impressive it is. He just moves through to the next thing. The power is entirely in service of the goal. That is the philosophy made visible. I have what I need for what matters. Nothing more needs to be said about it. His ability to sense the emotions of non-sentient objects, a capability revealed briefly in Abstract, is perhaps the strangest extension of his powers, and also the most telling. In that episode, he mentions that he has developed a new sensitivity, that he can feel what objects feel, or something like it. And the objects he mentions are not dramatic things, not weapons or powerful artifacts, just ordinary things, furniture, the stuff of daily life. He has grown sensitive enough in the aftermath of his transformation to perceive the emotional resonance of the mundane. This is the most profoundly Jake possible superpower. Not flight, not world-altering force. The ability to feel what a chair feels. Penn Ward once said in an interview that Jake uses his powers lazily and does not know their full extent. And this is true throughout most of the series. But I would argue the laziness is not a flaw. It is an expression of Jake's philosophy about capability. He does not need to know the full extent because the full extent is not the point. The point is what the powers do for the people around him. The point is the boat when they need to cross the river. The point is the key when they need to open the door. The point is the amplifier when the music needs to be louder than one voice can make it. The full extent of Jake's powers may be essentially unlimited. But Jake will always choose to use exactly as much as the situation needs, and not one bit more. Because he is not someone who needs to display power. He is someone who uses power in service of love. Part 6. Lady Rainicorn and the Language of Love. Lady Rainicorn speaks exclusively in Korean. This is not a quirk. This is not a throwaway detail. This is Adventure Time making a deliberate choice to put one of the series' most important love relationships behind a language barrier, and then spending the entire series exploring what it means to love someone, when communication requires genuine effort. Jake speaks Korean. He learned it. Not because Lady Rainicorn asked him to, not because they had a conversation where they decided this was necessary for the relationship to work. He just learned it because she speaks Korean and he wanted to talk to her. He wanted to know what she was thinking. He wanted to be present in her actual language, not just in translation. This is significant, and it is typical of how Jake approaches love. Lady Rainicorn is Princess Bubblegum's royal steed and best friend, a creature that resembles a Korean mythology-inspired flying rainbow unicorn, long and serpentine and spectacularly colored, moving through the sky with a quality of grace that is almost musical. She plays the viola. Jake plays the viola. Their relationship began, according to official lore, through this shared musical passion, which is such an emotionally true way for two people to fall in love that it feels almost embarrassingly real for a cartoon. What Jake and Lady have, across the series, is a love story told almost entirely in the spaces between action. Their relationship is not the focus of the show's drama in the way that Finn's various romantic entanglements are. It does not produce crises or complications, or the kind of anguished uncertainty that generates narrative tension. It is just stable, present, real. They meet every day at 4 in the afternoon. Jake shows up on time every time because she matters enough to him that being punctual is non-negotiable. He defends her with a ferocity that surprises people who mostly see him as laid back. He thinks about their future children before she is pregnant. He worries about making a good impression on her parents. There is an episode called Her Parents, in which Jake is trying to win over Lady Rainicorn's mother and father, Bob and Ethel. Bob in particular takes an immediate disliking to Jake, or rather to dogs, because there is a history between Rainicorns and dogs that involves ancient conflict, territorial disputes, and the kind of deep cultural prejudice that does not dissolve easily. Hi, Doc. Jake, in his attempt to impress them, initially lies about being a dog. He tries to present himself as something else. He pretends. And the pretending almost works until it does not, until the truth comes out, and then Jake has to reckon with the fact that love cannot be built on performance. What finally wins Bob and Ethel over is not a clever scheme. It is not Jake managing to seem like something he is not. It is Jake being exactly what he is, a dog who loves their daughter genuinely and is going to love her no matter what anyone thinks about it. Ethel, significantly, already refers to Jake as their future son-in-law before he even figures this out himself. She has already seen what is true. She was ahead of everyone. The viola playing is worth dwelling on for a moment. Both Jake and Lady play the viola, a specific instrument, not the more glamorous violin, not the more obvious guitar. The viola sits in the middle of an orchestra, neither the highest voice nor the lowest, providing the harmonic middle ground that everything else organizes around. It is the instrument of people who care more about the music than about being seen playing music. And there is something very Jake about that. Something very Lady, too. They are both middle ground people. Both the kinds of beings who make the rest of the music possible by holding the center without demanding the spotlight. When Lady announces she is pregnant, in the only English words she ever says organically in the series, at the end of the episode Lady and Peebles, looking directly at Jake, something genuinely moving happens in an episode that has been mostly about an entirely different adventure. It is a moment so casually enormous that it takes a second to land. And when it does land, you feel both the weight of it and the lightness of it simultaneously, because that is what good Adventure Time moments do. They are both things at once. Jake's response is not shown in that episode. It is picked up in the next one. And what we see is a dog who is genuinely, completely, overwhelmingly committed to this new reality before he even really understands what it means. He moves in with Lady immediately. He is determined to be the father his children need, to be present, to be capable, to not let them down. He overprepares in the way that new parents overprepare, consulting hollow messages from his mother, reading every piece of guidance he can find, trying to map the unknown terrain of fatherhood onto the knowledge he has. He is, of course, completely unprepared for what actually comes next. Not because the preparation was bad, but because nothing can really prepare you for it. Because children are not a problem to be solved with sufficient information. They are a relationship, and relationships are not solved. They are just had. There is a scene in Lady and Peebles that deserves its own extended examination, not for the pregnancy reveal, but for what the episode itself tells us about Lady Rainicorn as a being. The episode removes Jake from the equation entirely. He has been captured, and Lady and Princess Bubblegum have to mount a rescue operation. And what we discover in his absence is that Lady Rainicorn is not the gentle companion she sometimes appears to be in the background of Jake and Finn's adventures. She is formidable. She is physically capable, emotionally resolute, possessed of a specific kind of focused determination that complements Jake's ease in exactly the right way. She is not his softer half. She is his equal, expressed differently. This matters for understanding the Jake and Lady relationship properly. Jake is not drawn to Lady because she is gentle with him, because she provides a softness that his life otherwise lacks. He is drawn to her because she is genuinely remarkable, and he can tell. He learned Korean because she is worth understanding. He watches movies with her and talks about their future children and meets her at 4 p.m. every single day. Not because he is being a good boyfriend in the performative sense, but because spending time with her is simply the thing he most wants to do with that part of his day. Their relationship is shown in glimpses rather than arcs. We never get a full season or a mini-series dedicated to Jake and Lady's love story. We get scenes scattered across the show's run that accumulate into a portrait of a relationship that works. They play the viola together. They go to movie night and spend the whole time making out, which embarrasses everyone around them in a way that neither of them finds particularly concerning. They argue sometimes, over card wars, over Lady's pregnancy, over the challenges of raising 5 children who age at an impossible rate. But the arguments never shake the foundation. The foundation is too solid for that. What is the foundation? At its core, I think it is this. They chose each other when choosing each other was genuinely optional. Nobody made Jake learn Korean. Nobody made Lady wait for him at 4 p.m. They built their habits around each other freely, out of genuine want, and the habits became the structure of their shared life. This is the most durable kind of foundation there is. Not obligation, not necessity, just two beings who kept choosing the same thing every day until it became the shape of their existence. When Jake talks about Lady to Finn, which he does frequently, with the slightly distracted warmth of someone whose mind returns to a subject without being consciously directed there is a quality of wonder in it. He has been with her for a long time, and he is still a little amazed that she exists, still a little grateful that she is in his life. This is what long-term love that has not curdled into complacency looks like. Not fireworks every day, not crisis and resolution and passionate reconciliation. Just the steady, renewable wonder of someone who knows they have something worth protecting and treats it accordingly. Their physical distance, Lady lives in a stable in the cotton candy forest, Jake lives in the treehouse with Finn, is worth noting too. They do not live together until the pups are born, and even after Jake moves in briefly, he moves back to the treehouse when the pups have grown enough to not need constant supervision. This arrangement could seem like evidence of a casual or non-serious relationship. I think it is evidence of the opposite. Both Jake and Lady are complete people with their own lives, their own friendships, their own purposes. Their relationship does not require them to abandon those things. It exists alongside them, comfortably, without demanding total merger. They are together, but not fused. Committed, but not diminished. This is a healthier model for adult romantic partnership than most animated shows manage to portray. And it is delivered almost entirely without comment, just as the background condition of how these two beings live. Adventure Time trusted its audience to see it without being told what to see. Jake's response is not shown in that episode. It is picked up in the next one. And what we see is a dog who is genuinely, completely, overwhelmingly committed to this new reality before he even really understands what it means. Part 6. 5 pups. Jake the dad. The children arrive, and they are not what anyone expected. Their names are Charlie, Jake Jr., TV, Viola, and Kim Kil-wan. 5 of them. 5 half-dog, half-rainicorn beings who arrive in the world small and round and burbling, and then, within a time span that can only be described as cosmically inconsiderate, grow up. Fast. Radically fast. The rainicorn side of their heritage carries with it a developmental pace that makes normal mammal growth look glacial. Within days of their birth, Jake's children are effectively adults. Kim Kil-won, by the end of the same episode in which he is born, already has a beard. Jake is not ready for this. Nobody is ready for this. The usual arc of parenthood, the slow accumulation of time with a person who is gradually becoming themselves, is compressed into a window that does not give Jake room to be the parent he imagined being. He cannot shepherd them through childhood. Childhood happens in about 48 hours, and then it is over. And what he has instead are 5 adult children who are, in many ways, already more emotionally mature than he is, who find his parenting instincts sweet and slightly infantilizing, and who are beginning to form their own opinions about how present he has and has not been. The episode Jake the Dad is about Jake discovering that the form of love he planned to give, protective, watchful, instructive, does not fit the actual situation. What he planned was a long, gradual process of guiding children through danger. What he gets is 5 beings who can already handle danger better than he can in his current sleep-deprived state. When a gang of foxes kidnaps a still sleepy Jake because they misread the plot of a book he had thrown out, Baby-Eating Fox and the Babies, it is the pups who rescue him. 5 small beings who have existed for approximately 2 days, who have never been in a real fight, who figure out how to combine themselves into a single coordinated entity, Super Pup, and demolish a threat that had Jake completely outmatched. Jake's mother's holo message, which he has been consulting throughout the episode like a divine oracle, turns out to be less useful than his pups. Jake Jr., the first to speak, says something that causes Jake to flash back to his own childhood and a Cobra situation and his mother's calm, trust your instincts guidance. And the lesson lands. You do not protect children by taking all risks away from them. You protect them by making sure they know they can handle what comes. By trusting them, by letting them handle it. He goes back to the treehouse. Not because he stopped being a father, not because the children no longer matter to him, but because they are genuinely fine without him watching over them every minute. They are in many ways already older than he is. The episodes that follow over subsequent seasons trace a more complicated version of this. In Ocarina, we see that several of the pups, Kim Kil-won especially, are frustrated by Jake's absence. Not because they needed him to be present in the way infants need parents, but because they wanted him to be present in the way adult children want parents. To show up for them as people, to take their adult lives seriously, to maintain contact as beings, rather than just as his offspring. Jake Jr. in One Last Job wants her father to see her, to validate her existence in ways that have nothing to do with whether she needs him to keep her safe. TV is still living in Lady Rainicorn's house playing video games, when his siblings have already moved out, stuck in a kind of developmental paralysis that mirrors Jake's own tendency towards stagnation when left unchallenged. Each of Jake's 5 children embodies a specific emotional challenge, the kind of challenges that arise specifically from having a father who is wonderful but also sometimes absent, who is loving but also sometimes too comfortable with things staying the same. Charlie, the most like Jake in personality, the most accepting of change, is also the one who gets the least focused attention in the episodes, which says something interesting about how visibility and drama intersect. Kim Kil-won is the most financially practical, the one who has built an adult life with a spouse and a child of his own. A daughter named Bronwyn, who becomes relevant in the final season as a capable adventurer in her own right. Kim Kil-won also applies real pressure to Jake in Ocarina, confronting him about his responsibilities in a scene that is played seriously, that does not let Jake charm his way out of it the way he usually charms his way out of things. Jake has to actually sit with the weight of having been less present than his children needed. Viola plays the viola, which is both very on the nose and very sweet. TV is named after television, which was his mother's pregnancy craving. Jake Jr. has what can only be described as a unique facial configuration, inheriting certain biological characteristics from the worn ampersand side of the family, in a way that becomes more interesting and more eerie as the series progresses and we understand more about what that inheritance actually means. There is something particularly poignant about TV's episode called The Diary. TV spends his days in Lady Rainicorn's house playing video games, while his siblings have moved out and built adult lives. He lacks motivation in the way that some young people lack motivation, not because he is incapable or lazy at the deepest level, but because he has not yet found the thing that makes him want to get up and go toward something. When he stumbles across a diary and begins investigating, he pours into it the same intensity that he usually pours into video games. He finds a reason to care. He finds himself connected to something outside himself. This is such a recognizable pattern. The capacity was always there. It just needed the right trigger. And what TV's episode tells us about Jake is that his tendency toward easy comfort, his capacity to be perfectly happy staying still when there is nothing specifically pulling him forward, has been passed on. Not as a curse, but as a trait, which, like all traits, can be an asset or a liability depending on how it interacts with circumstance. TV is fine. He is going to be fine. He has his mother's determination underneath the surface somewhere. He just has to find his version of the thing that gets him out the door. Charlie's relationship with Jake, explored in the episode Summer Showers, is the most adult and in some ways the most beautiful of the five. Jake tricks Charlie into accompanying him to a Card Wars tournament based on her skills with tarot cards. She agrees to participate in exchange for one of his bones, which he no longer needs because stretchy powers, and uses it to do a reading on herself, glimpsing her own future decades all at once. She absorbs decades of wisdom in a few moments, ages visibly, and then uses that perspective to help Jake navigate his own competitive feelings about the tournament. By the end, when they lose and Jake has to process the loss gracefully, Charlie is the one who helps him bury his competitive 20s energy symbolically in the most concrete and literal way possible. This is what Jake at his best looks like as a parent. Not providing for his children in the material sense, not protecting them from difficulty, just being in the same room with them, doing something together, letting the relationship carry whatever it needs to carry in that moment. The wisdom goes both ways. The parent learns from the child as much as the child learns from the parent. This is the ideal that Josh and Margaret modeled for him, pushed him, yes, expected things of him, yes, but also genuinely saw him, listened to him, allowed him to be right about things, and it is the ideal he imperfectly, inconsistently, lovably reaches toward with his own kids. Being a father changes Jake. Not radically, not in the way of someone whose entire personality shifts, but in the way of someone who now has specific, named, real people in the world who need him to be a particular kind of person. Not just good in general, but good in specific ways, for specific reasons, for them. He cannot be as effortlessly irresponsible as he used to be. He cannot entirely separate himself from consequence. He has people who can tell him, clearly and to his face, that they feel the absence of him, and he has to decide what to do with that information. What he decides, across the arc of the series, is to try. Not perfectly, not with some dramatic transformation into Father of the Year, just to try, to show up more, to take his children seriously as adults while also never entirely surrendering the delight he takes in them. To be, as much as he can manage, the version of his own father he actually needed, less focused on toughening and more focused on seeing. Part 7. Death, the Croak Dream, and why Jake does not fear the end. Something happens to you, or at least something happened to me, the first time I watched the episode called The New Frontier, and watched Jake receive the news of his own predicted death with complete equanimity. Something that was not quite sure what to do with itself. Because we are so used, in fiction and in life, to the idea that the right response to death is fear. That fearing death is what sane, feeling people do. That the alternative, not fearing it, is either denial or performative bravery or some kind of emotional damage dressed up as wisdom. Jake makes you reconsider that. His Croak Dream involves the cosmic owl, who, in Adventure Time's cosmology, is a reliable indicator that a dream is prophetic and will come true. The cosmic owl appearing in your dream means this is not just a dream. this is what will happen. Jake's dream shows his death, connected in some way to a character called Banana Man, voiced with delightful absurdity by Weird Al Yankovic. And Jake's response to this is not horror, not desperate scheming to avoid the outcome, not the kind of white-knuckle fight against inevitability that we might expect. His response is something closer to, well, okay, if this is how it happens, this is how it happens. This is not resignation. The difference between resignation and acceptance is enormous, and Jake embodies the better version. Resignation says, I cannot change this, so I give up. Acceptance says, I cannot change this, so I will meet it fully, without the added weight of resistance. Jake has decided, not consciously, not through some explicit philosophical commitment, but through the accumulated habit of a lifetime, that the things he cannot control are not worth suffering over. He can only be where he is. He can only do what he can do. Death is outside his control. Therefore, he will not spend his life in fear of it. This is also what makes Jake's relationship with his own mortality unusual in Adventure Time, a show that has a lot of characters with complicated relationships with death. Marceline spent centuries trying to process the trauma of abandonment. The Ice King is frozen in a grief so old and so total that it has become an entirely different person. The Lich is animated by death, is, in some sense, what death looks like when it becomes unchecked and malevolent. Even Princess Bubblegum, who is technically an immortal candy being, has done things in the name of extending life and preventing death that raise serious ethical questions. Jake just is not like that. He is not frozen by the knowledge of his own ending. He has the cosmic owl dream and he moves on. He dies, actually dies, for real, in the episode Sons of Mars, when Finn accidentally causes a magical staff to strike the disguised Jake, and it kills him. And then Abraham Lincoln sacrifices his own immortality to bring Jake back. And Jake is grateful, genuinely grateful, but also fundamentally unsurprised that this was how the story went. Things happen. Sometimes those things are your death. Sometimes Abraham Lincoln trades his immortality to undo your death. The world is strange and you are in it, and the right response to all of that is to keep being present for the people who need you to be present. There is also the moment in Sons of Mars when Jake is offered two options for his execution, and shows what might be curiosity about the Stardust option, the one where his consciousness would be spread across the universe. Not horror, not desperation to avoid it, just an actual openness to what might come next. The way you might look at a door you have never opened, not with dread, but with something closer to interest. He ultimately does not want to go, specifically because of Finn, because he does not want to leave Finn without him. But the absence of existential terror in his consideration is remarkable. This attitude threads through the whole series. In Ghostfly, Jake is temporarily killed by a ghost and has to navigate the process of being brought back through a series of rituals that range from complex to deeply silly. He handles the whole thing the way he handles most things, with a kind of pragmatic good humor that refuses to treat his own death as a personal insult. In The New Frontier, he is basically prepared to die according to the prophecy, and the only thing that gives him pause is the grief it would cause Finn. The grief is the argument against it. Not his own desire to survive, Finn's need to not lose him. The episode Sons of Mars also gives us something rare. A Jake who dies, processes death with mild curiosity, and is brought back by Abraham Lincoln sacrificing his own immortality. Lincoln offers death a penny. Death says, not this time. Lincoln gives up his eternal life to restore Jake. And Jake receives this extraordinary sacrifice with the warm but unsurprised gratitude of someone who understands that people who love you do large things sometimes. He is grateful. He is moved. He does not treat it as more than it is or less than it is. He is just glad to be back, and glad that Lincoln existed, and sorry that Lincoln died in the process. There is something almost impossibly mature about Jake's relationship with other people's sacrifices on his behalf. He does not spiral into guilt. He does not catastrophize over the pate. He does not refuse to accept care because accepting it makes him feel too indebted. He receives what is given with a fullness and a warmth that honors the giving, processes it, and moves forward. This is the healthy version of receiving love, neither dismissing it nor being crushed by it, just allowing it to land. Jake also demonstrates across the series that his relationship with death extends to the deaths of others. He grieves. He is not numb. When characters he cares about are lost, when Prismo is killed by the Lich, when Joshua and Margaret died before the events of the series, when the treehouse is destroyed at the series' end, he feels it. But his grief does not last forever and does not become the defining shape of his experience. He grieves completely, and then he continues, not because he is shallow, but because he has understood something about mourning that is genuinely wise. Grief is love with nowhere to go, and the right response to love is not to stop it, but to redirect it, toward the living, toward what remains, toward whatever the next thing is that deserves care. This is also why Jake is not afraid to talk about death. It is not a subject he avoids or deflects. When Finn panics about the Croak dream, Jake explains his own feelings about it with a frankness that Finn finds both reassuring and terrifying. Death is just something that happens. It happens to everyone. Fighting it uses up the energy that could be spent on living. The Cosmic Owl says this is how it ends? Fine. Okay. Then let us see what there is to do in the time before the end. This is not resignation. This is the sanest possible engagement with mortality that a living being can manage. And Jake, magical dog, shape-shifting alien hybrid, bacon pancake enthusiast, viola player, father, brother, boyfriend, adventurer, Jake manages it. With grace and without making a big deal of it, because the whole point of making peace with death is that you do not have to make a big deal of it anymore. You just live, fully, for as long as you have. This is also what makes Jake's eventual death, of old age, peacefully, after a long life well lived, so completely right. There is no other death that fits him. He is not the kind of person who dies heroically in battle, sacrificing himself for the world. He is not the kind of person who is consumed by some cosmic force larger than himself. He is the kind of person who lives until it is time not to, and goes gently, and ends up in the highest tier of the afterlife because he spent his whole existence earning it, one present moment at a time. This is actually quite beautiful and quite specific to who Jake is. He does not cling to life for his own sake. He holds on for the people who need him. His life is, in the deepest sense, organized outward, toward others, toward Finn first, toward Lady, toward his children, toward the people and beings and places that make up the world he genuinely loves. His hold on existence is not tight or anxious or self-interested. It is loose and warm and directed entirely toward others, which is, in the end, the sanest possible relationship with mortality. Not fearlessness for its own sake, not bravado, just a life so thoroughly invested in other people that the self's continuance is secondary to the question of what the self is for. Part 8. Warren Ampersand and the truth under the story. Somewhere around Season 6, Adventure Time started laying down seeds for a revelation about Jake that would not fully bloom until Season 9 and 10. Small moments, strange dreams, a hint here, a visual there. Jake's powers doing something slightly unfamiliar, slightly more than they should. The lump on Joshua's head in the flashback episode. The blue color. The 5 eyes. Warren Ampersand is first seen in the episode Joshua and Margaret Investigations. Not introduced, not named, just seen. A blue, multi-eyed, shape-shifting creature that Joshua and Margaret encounter while investigating a case. It bites Joshua, it laughs, it leaves, and the episode moves on to Jake's birth as if the creature is just part of the backstory, just the biological trigger that sets the main event in motion. But that creature comes back. Jake formally meets Warren Ampersand at the end of the episode The First Investigation, during a sequence in which he witnesses his own birth in a kind of temporal vision, watches himself pop out of his father's head, sings and dances and falls asleep, is gathered up by his parents, and begins to understand that the story he told himself about his origins was only the surface of a much stranger truth. Warren Ampersand, old and weakened, appears at the edge of this vision and tells Jake they have to leave. They step through a portal together, and in Jake the Star Child, the full picture comes into focus. Warren Ampersand is Jake's biological father. Not in the conventional sense. There was no romantic relationship between Warren and Joshua, to be clear. Warren's biology works differently. His venom, transmitted through a bite, carries genetic material. When he bit Joshua, he planted the seed of a child, in the way that an alien organism plants genetic material in a host. Joshua, despite all expectations, gave birth to that child. Not Margaret. Joshua. From the lump on his head, into a midnight forest while Margaret was delivering Germaine elsewhere in the yard. This is Jake's biological truth. He is half the creature that bit his father. Half something ancient and shape-shifting and not native to the land of Ooh at all. Half a being who is, as Jake discovers in Jake the Star Child, technically capable of much more than he has ever allowed himself to explore. Warren takes Jake to his home planet, a world called Nera, which is just Warren spelled backwards, a detail that in retrospect tells you everything about what this world actually is. The citizens of Nera treat Jake like a celebrity. There is a museum dedicated to him. There is a prophecy about him. Warren shows Jake a bedroom he made for him, gives him a belt that says Galaxy Savior, tells him about a destiny that involves defeating a monster called Ixcano and saving the world. And Jake, who is generally not someone who requires a destiny, lets himself be carried by this for a little while. He is generous with his powers during the preparations. He stretches extensively, using capabilities he has rarely tapped, going further and harder than he usually allows himself to go. And as he does, something visually alarming starts happening. He is getting older, more tired, more worn. And Warren is looking younger. Because that is what the belt does. That is what Nera is. There is no civilization here. There was never a civilization here. The entire planet, every citizen, every building, every street and display and artifact in the Jakesium, it was all Warren. Warren stretched into the shape of a world. Warren posing as an entire population. Warren constructing an elaborate theater of destiny and homecoming, specifically to get Jake to use his powers extensively enough that the belt could drain them, could transfer Jake's youth and life force to Warren. This is what Warren has done to every one of his children. Made them, visited them, staged this performance of connection and destiny, and then drained them. Every single one. Jake was going to be the latest in a long line of children sacrificed to their biological father's will to survive. Except Bai, in that moment of realization, does something very Jake. He feigns sadness and asks Warren to hold him. He pretends to accept the situation, to be dying, to want comfort from the father he never had. And Warren, who has in some corner of himself something like actual affection for Jake, who admitted that Jake was the only child he felt any guilt about draining, agrees to hold him. And Jake switches the belts, transfers the drain back onto Warren, regains his power. He defeats his biological father, not with strength, but with cleverness and with a working knowledge of how manipulation actually functions, because Jake has enough experience with the gray areas of morality to recognize a con when he is living inside one. But then Jake makes a mistake. He gloats. He tells Warren he is a better father than Warren ever was, that he has children of his own, that he raised them with actual love. And Warren, learning that Jake has offspring to drain, immediately shifts targets. Jake throws him into a black hole without a second thought. This is a moment that tells you a great deal about who Jake is as a parent. The philosophical serenity about his own death, the general easiness with his own mortality, that all falls away when his children are threatened. There is no deliberation. There is no weighing of consequences or considering whether Warren deserves a chance at redemption. There is just Jake, protecting his kids, with the absolute reflexive swiftness of someone who has decided that there are some categories of threat that do not get philosophical consideration. They just get removed. The entire Warren Ampersand arc is also, quietly, a story about the difference between biological origin and parental choice. Warren made Jake. In the most literal biological sense, his genetic material, transmitted through venom, is what Jake is made of at the deepest level. Warren contributed the shape-shifting. Warren contributed the alien biology. Warren is, technically, the source of the powers that define Jake's entire life. And Warren is also unmistakably the worst possible version of what a parent can be. He views his offspring as resources. He creates children for the express purpose of eventually consuming them. Every single child he has ever had was made to be drained. Joshua, by contrast, did not create Jake at all. Jake happened to Joshua. Jake was an unexpected consequence of a dangerous case, an alien bite, a biological mystery that Joshua could have refused to claim. And he claimed it. He brought that puppy home, put him in a stroller beside Jermaine, raised him with the same expectations and the same love and the same hat on the head covering the evidence of a wound. Joshua was not Jake's biological father. He was just Jake's father. Full stop. Because fatherhood is a choice, and Joshua made it without hesitation and maintained it without condition. This is what the Warren arc says in the language of an 11-minute cartoon that somehow manages to fit this level of thematic density into its runtime. The person who made you is not necessarily the person who is responsible for you. Biology is origin, but not destiny. You can inherit someone's eyes and owe them nothing. What you owe is to the people who chose you when they did not have to, who stayed when staying was a choice, who got up every morning and decided again that you were worth it. Jake absorbed this lesson so completely from Joshua and Margaret that when Warren reveals himself, the revelation barely shakes him. He grieves a little for the relationship he thought he was going to have, the museum full of pictures of his life, the planet that seemed to welcome him, the father who seemed to finally be reaching toward connection after decades of absence. And then he adjusts. He sees the con. He runs it in reverse. He goes home. He has a real family waiting. He does not need a fake one, however elaborately constructed. Warren's last words, falling into the black hole, are, "I'm going 4D, baby," which is either the most absurdist exit line in Adventure Time history or a genuine hint that Warren Ampersand is not done. That somewhere beyond the visible universe he has found some new and unimaginable shape to stretch himself into. Whether that means anything is left entirely to speculation. What it definitely means is that Jake wins, fully and completely, and without carrying the story forward as a wound. He does not spend episodes afterward processing the trauma of discovering his biological origins were a manipulation. He does not collapse into identity crisis over the knowledge that he was created as part of a parasitic reproductive strategy. He goes back to ooh. He is still Jake. He is still the same person. The information lands, is processed, and is folded into the ongoing reality of who he is without breaking him. This is the most Jake possible response to a genuinely shocking piece of information. Part 9. The True Form. Abstract, change, and the art of staying yourself. After the events of the Elements miniseries, a 4-episode story in which the fundamental elements of ooh go haywire, transforming everything and everyone in their path. Jake comes out the other side looking different, significantly different, dramatically, cosmically, undeniably different. He is blue now, not a subtle shift in hue, not a tint. Blue the way the ocean is blue, a deep and total saturation covering all of him. He has grown. He has multiple eyes, 5 of them, arranged in the star pattern that we now recognize as the genetic fingerprint of Warren Ampersand's bloodline. He has wings. He looks less like the comfortable, round, familiar dog that has been at the center of the series since the beginning, and more like something from another dimension, something that belongs to the category of creature that prompted Joshua and Margaret to load their crossbows when they encountered it in those dark woods all those years ago. This is Jake's true form. Not the yellow dog, which is also real, also genuinely him, but the default resting state of his alien biology when the suppression mechanism that keeps it contained is removed. The elements event apparently served as enough of a disruption to the normal order that whatever Jake had been doing to maintain his familiar shape without fully knowing he was doing it stopped working for a while. And what he defaulted to, underneath the conscious management, was something that looked like his biological father. Finn is unsettled. BMO is more than unsettled. And Jake, who has spent decades being the calm center of every anxious situation around him, now finds himself on the receiving end of others' discomfort with his appearance. The episode abstract is about what Jake does with this. He goes to see Jermaine. Jermaine, who stayed at the family house, who has been painting abstract art for years now, who has undergone his own transformation from the tense, burden-carrying brother we met in earlier episodes into someone who has found a kind of freedom through artistic practice. Jake and Jermaine have a complicated relationship. There was jealousy between them. Jermaine feeling like Jake and Finn were favored, feeling the weight of staying while they got to leave and adventure and be celebrated. A fire destroyed the family home at one point, a confrontation and a resolution that did not resolve everything cleanly. Brothers rarely do. But in abstract, Jermaine is who Jake needs. Because Jermaine has worked out something about change that Jake is in the process of discovering. Jermaine shows Jake his art, abstract paintings, shapes and colors that do not represent objects, that do not tell you what to look at, that simply are what they are. Jake does not immediately understand. He is not an abstract art person, naturally. He is a person who finds meaning in concrete things, in specific friendships and foods and sensations and moments. He has to sit with the paintings for a while. And then something opens up. He looks at the shapes, and he sees what they are doing. They are always changing. The shapes are not fixed. The colors move into each other, bleed, shift, become other things. And yet the painting is still itself. The changing is not destruction, the changing is the thing. The shapes shift and flow and become new configurations, and at no point does the painting cease to be a painting, cease to be what it is, cease to have meaning and coherence. He has a revelation that the episode states outright, which Adventure Time does sometimes when the thing it needs to say is important enough to say directly. Everything changes. Changing is the normal state. Even if we are not changing on the outside, we are changing on the inside constantly. Jake returns to his dog form. Not because the alien form was wrong or bad or something to be rejected, not because he failed to accept it, but because he actually looks inward, sees the shape of what he fundamentally is, and discovers that the shape is still Jake. It was always still Jake. The true form is just another version of the same person who has always been in there. He can let the alien emerge when it needs to. He can fold it back when it does not. He is not fixed. He is flexible. He is, has always been, will always be, a being of infinite shapes who has the specific gift of choosing which shape to wear. He comes home whistling. He hangs one of Jermaine's paintings on the wall. Finn asks if he is back to normal. Jake looks in the bathroom mirror and says, "Different, but the same." That is one of the most perfect sentences in the series. Different but the same. Changed but continuous. Evolved but recognizable. Still here, still Jake. Part 10. The Great Gum War, GOLB, and the finale. By the time the series reaches its conclusion in the episode Come Along With Me, a lot has happened. Adventure Time built across a decade into something that was simultaneously a show about two friends having adventures, and a show about the nature of time and trauma and civilization, and grief, and what it means to live in the ruins of a world that destroyed itself, and be, somehow, still alive, still building, still trying. The finale is enormous. Not in the abstract, literary sense of enormous, but actually, physically, cosmically enormous. A threat that requires almost every character the show has introduced to stand together against it. Princess Bubblegum's dictatorial Uncle Gumbald has assembled an army against the Candy Kingdom. A great gum war is about to happen, and Finn and Jake, who have watched the tension escalate for a whole season, are trying to find a way to prevent it. What they discover through a series of events that begin with a dream shared by multiple characters is that a deity named Golb, an entity that represents pure chaos, pure destructive entropy, the dissolution of all form and order, is going to arrive in Oo because of the conflict. Because Golb feeds on conflict, because wherever beings gather to destroy each other, Golb is drawn like a tide. The resolution is not a fight, it is a song. Golb's essence, it turns out, is vulnerable to music, to the specifically ordered, harmonically intentional form of communication that music represents. The opposite of case, the opposite of entropy, the thing that human beings and candy people and dog alien hybrids and vampire queens and fire elementals and robot children all do when they want to say something that is too large and too real for ordinary language. Everyone sings, they sing together, and the music, amplified by Jake, who stretches himself to an enormous scale to function as a speaker, a resonator, a vessel for the combined voices of everyone who wants Oo to continue existing, reaches into the chaos deity and disrupts it. Jake is the amplifier, which is so completely right. Not the sword, not the shield, not the weapon. The thing that takes what others have to offer and makes it bigger. The thing that allows the community to be heard. Golb is not entirely defeated. What happens is stranger and sadder. Betty Groff, who has been searching the entire series for a way to restore Simon Petrikov from the Ice King's madness, finds the Ice Crown has returned to its essential wishing form. She tries to wish Golby out of existence. It does not work. She wishes instead that Simon is protected at all costs. Golb, interpreting this literally, fuses with Betty, becomes Betty Golb, a new entity that is both chaos and the person who chose to become chaos rather than let Simon be destroyed. She leaves Aoi. Simon is free. His madness is gone. He is human again. It is one of the most devastating and beautiful moments in the series. And it happens in the middle of a finale that also features Jake helping Finn and Simon escape from inside Golb's body, a treehouse being destroyed, Fern, the grass element version of Finn created from the grass sword, dying and returning to the earth as a seed, and the birth of what will eventually become a new treehouse containing, of all things, a grass sword. At the end of Come Along With Me, years in the future, we see Shermie and Beth, two young adventurers in a far future Oo, discovering a flag on a hill, reenacting something they heard in a story. The final shot mirrors the original Adventure Time short. The world continues. The story continues. Everything ends and everything begins again. Yike, in the finale, is exactly who he has always been. Caring, present, using his powers in the exact right way at the exact right moment, comforting the people around him when the world shakes, making the impossible feel slightly more possible just by being in it. He promised Finn they would plant Fern's seedling in the ruins of the treehouse. He is going to do that. He does everything he says he is going to do. Part 11. After the finale. Growing old in Oo. The series ends. And then it does not entirely, because Adventure Time Distant Lands gives us 4 specials set after the events of Come Along With Me, in various timelines and perspectives, gradually filling in the spaces that the finale deliberately left empty. We learn, across these specials, that Jake has continued to be Jake, that he and Lady Rainicorn remain together, that his children grew and had their own children, and those children grew too, and Jake's descendants eventually become something extraordinary. A spacefaring civilization extending outward from O into the cosmos, carrying the genetic inheritance of a magical dog who was also half alien into the wider universe that his biological father came from. Beth, who appears in the far future as an adventurer alongside Shermie, is Jake's descendant. She has his powers. She has his warmth. She is the proof that what Jake built, the family, the love, the continuation, outlasted him by centuries. But Jake himself gets old. This is addressed quietly in the episode Obsidian, which focuses on Marceline and Princess Bubblegum. We see Finn as an older man. He has a tattoo of Jake on his arm. A large, prominent memorial tattoo, the kind of tattoo you get for someone you have lost and want to carry with you. Jake is not beside him, and in the absence of explanation, the visual does its work completely. We understand. We do not need the details. The tattoo says everything. Jake died of old age, sometime after the end of the series, sometime before the events of Obsidian. Probably not very long before. The confirmation comes, eventually, in the Fiona and Cake series, when Finn tells someone that Jake has been gone for a while, that he died some years after the finale. What was his death like? The show does not show it directly. Steve Wolfhard, one of the show's writers, has a headcanon about it that fans have embraced, something cozy and peaceful, something befitting a being who made peace with mortality decades before it arrived. The specifics are not what matters. What matters is the texture of a life that ended naturally, in the fullness of time, surrounded by love. Finn lives on without Jake for many years. This is not shown in detail, but we know it from what we see of older Finn. He carries the loss. He carries it in the way that people carry the loss of someone who was the most essential relationship of their life, not broken by it, but changed by it, organized differently around it. The treehouse that was destroyed in the finale eventually grows into a new treehouse from Fern's seed. Finn keeps going. He keeps adventuring. He is, in the end, genuinely fine in the way that people who have been loved, as completely as Jake loved him, are fine after loss, grieving but not diminished. And then, after a long life, Finn dies too. And the story that Adventure Time has been building toward in its back half, the story that was seeded in The New Frontier and Sons of Mars and a dozen other moments, finally arrives. Part 12. Together Again, The Afterlife, The Last Adventure, and The Final Truth. It is worth knowing, before we begin this last chapter, that the Adventure Time Distant Lands special called Together Again is one of the finest hours of animation that has been made for any audience at any age, and that it handles its subject, the reunion of Finn and Jake in death, with such emotional intelligence and such genuine warmth that it functions simultaneously as a complete story and as a culmination of everything the show ever built. The special opens with Finn realizing he is dead. He has been having what seemed like a normal adventure. He and Jake escaping from an ice cream cave, a kidnapped princess, an ice king. But something is slightly wrong with it. The edges are too soft. The logic is slightly off. The adventure is replaying beats they have done 100 times before. And then the simulation resolves and Finn understands that he has been in an orientation waiting room for the afterlife, experiencing happy memories, while his consciousness adjusted to being no longer alive. He is in the first dead world, and he needs to find Jake. The dead worlds are arranged by how people lived. The 50th dead world, the highest, the most rarefied, is nirvana. Not in the casual, vague sense of that word, but in the specific sense. A state of perfect peace and release, a cessation of all striving, a condition of total contentment. Who has been spending his entire life practically working toward exactly this state, gets there. Of course, he gets there. He dies and he goes immediately to the most enlightened tier of the afterlife, because that is what 40 or 50 or 60 years of being laid back and accepting and present and genuinely not worried about things actually builds toward. Finn has been assigned to the 37th dead world, which is fine, decent, not bad. But not where Jake is. There is a complication. New Death has replaced his father, Old Death, as ruler of the dead worlds. New Death is basically a cosmic teenager with too much power and not enough wisdom. Reckless, impatient, easily frustrated, genuinely dangerous in the way that powerful things are dangerous when they have not yet been tempered by consequences. He is, as we eventually learn, being manipulated by the Lich, who has found a way to continue causing harm, even from the state of non-existence into which he was cast. The Lich's influence has been steering New Death toward a plan to destroy all the dead worlds, to end the cycle of death and resurrection, to eliminate the possibility of reincarnation, to make all endings final and all deaths permanent. Finn will do anything to reach Jake. He goes through dead world after dead world, encountering characters from across the series, his parents Joshua and Margaret, Jermaine, Tree Trunks surrounded by her various former husbands, Tiffany, Ghost Princess, dozens of Ooze dead. He uses every piece of knowledge the show has accumulated, the clapping signal Jake taught him in case they both ended up dead and needed to find each other. The same signal established in the episode James Baxter the Horse in the third season and called back here 8 years later, which is the kind of long game Adventure Time played, and the reason it deserves every minute of attention anyone gave it. And Jake comes down from the 50th Dead World to find Finn. Not because he has to, not because anyone requires this of him, because he senses, from his state of perfect peace, that Finn's vibe is off. He comes because Finn is here and needs him, and Jake will always, in any state of existence, go where Finn needs him. Their reunion is joyful and also genuinely complicated in the way of relationships that have been separated by death. Finn is hurt that Jake was not waiting for him. Jake, with the peace of someone who has genuinely moved past the things of the living world, has to explain that the 50th Dead World is not about waiting. It is about letting go. It is about being so completely at peace with everything that the categories of waiting and longing do not really apply anymore. He came the moment he felt Finn's distress, but he was not hovering, not holding on, not counting down. Finn has trouble with this. Finn, who defines himself in large part through his relationships, through his presence for others, through his commitment to people. Finn finds the idea of peace without holding on genuinely difficult. He came here wanting to be reunited with his brother. He discovers his brother had already found a peace that, in some sense, did not include waiting for him. And he has to work out whether that is a betrayal or a gift. It is a gift. That is the answer the special arrives at. Jake's enlightenment is not an abandonment of Finn. It is a model. It is the thing Finn has always been moving toward, the destination his entire life has been building toward, the release of the specific grasping and striving and urgent need to be enough that has characterized him since childhood. Jake got there first, and he came back from it to show Finn the way. What makes this scene work so well? And it is one of the most emotionally precise scenes in Adventure Time's entire history, is how it handles the asymmetry between them. Finn and Jake have always been asymmetric. Jake was always a little ahead of Finn on the things that matter most, more at peace with himself, more settled in his identity, less desperate for external validation. But the series always presented this asymmetry gently, without making Finn feel lesser for it. The asymmetry was always in service of both of them. Jake's peace made space for Finn's passion. Finn's urgency kept Jake from drifting too far into comfortable stagnation. Here in the Dead Worlds, the asymmetry is at its most pronounced. Jake has found the thing. Jake is in nirvana, and Finn, for the first time in their entire lives together, is not just catching up to Jake but genuinely uncertain whether he can make the journey at all. The idea of peace without longing is so foreign to Finn's nature that it might as well be a language he does not speak. He has spent his whole life longing for adventure, for purpose, for love, for meaning, for the next thing and the thing after that. The idea of a state where all that striving simply stops, where you are so complete that wanting ceases to be the shape of your experience, is genuinely terrifying to him. And Jake, because he is Jake, meets this not with impatience or superiority, but with perfect patience. He is here. He came down from his perfect peace to be here. Not because the peace needed him to leave, but because Finn needed him to return. And he does it without resentment, without martyrdom, without any sense of sacrifice. He is genuinely, fully happy to be here with Finn, in this complicated and loud dead world, fighting new death and dealing with Tiffany and trying to figure out how life and death's family drama relates to the end of the cycle of existence. He is happy to be here because Finn is here. That has always been enough. The plot of the special, New Death, the Lich's manipulation, the threat to all the dead worlds, is handled with tremendous skill and a particularly satisfying resolution involving Mr. Fox, a background character from across the series who appears here as Finn's afterlife guide and ends the special as the New Death, immediately using his first act in the role to turn Death's scythe into a pillow and give everyone a pillow too. This is an Adventure Time ending. This is exactly what the show is and always has been. In the fight against New Death, both Finn and Jake are willing to sacrifice themselves to let the other reincarnate. Enlightened wants Finn to have the chance, to go back, to live more, to be given more time in the world. Finn, entirely himself, does not want to live it without Jake. They argue about who gets to be the sacrifice in the exact way that you would expect them to argue about it, with equal and opposite loves running headlong into each other, and neither of them willing to yield. Neither of them has to. Mr. Fox takes care of it, as he does. With New Death gone and the Lich's severed hand the only remaining threat, Jake crushes it and throws it into the void. The Lich, who has haunted Adventure Time since nearly the beginning, ends here. Not with a grand battle, not with a catastrophe. Jake crushes a hand and throws it away, and the ancient enemy of all life is finished, and Jake wipes his paw like someone who just dealt with an inconvenience. The casualness of this moment is, paradoxically, its power. The Lich is one of the most terrifying antagonists in animated television. The show spent years building his threat, and he ends at Jake's paw. Not because Jake is the most powerful being. He is not by any reasonable measure. But because the Lich's entire philosophy, that all life should end, that existence is error, is the precise opposite of everything Jake represents. Jake, who has made peace with death and therefore made peace with life. Jake, who has stretched himself into every form and returned to himself unchanged. Jake, who has built something, a family, a friendship, a legacy that extends outward centuries into a future he will never see but that exists because he existed, is the correct response to everything the Lich ever argued for. And then Finn makes a wish. He asks to be reincarnated, to go back into the world, to live again in a new form, as someone new who is still in some essential way the person Finn has always been. And Jake, who had already found his peace in the 50th dead world, makes the decision that is most completely and totally Jake. He decides to go back with Finn, not because he needs to, not because enlightenment was insufficient, but because the chance to spend more time with Finn is worth leaving Nirvana for. The peace will be there when he gets back. Finn is here now. They return to the world together. What they return as exactly is something that Adventure Time leaves open. The comics, which are not strictly canonical but which contain too much resonance with the show to be entirely dismissed, suggest that Finn's reincarnation results in a character called Penelope, a future adventurer who embodies much of what Finn was. Jake's reincarnation is less specified. Jake Jr.'s mouth bears the star shape of worn ampersands, suggesting the genetic inheritance continues. Beth, far in the future, has stretchy powers and Jake's warmth and Jake's ease with herself. The cycle continues. The shapes change. The person remains. Epilogue. What Jake teaches us. It is harder to talk about what Jake means than it is to talk about what almost any other character in Adventure Time means. Because what Jake means is not located in a single dramatic arc or a specific revelation or a clean thematic statement. It is distributed across everything. It is in the small moments as much as the large ones. It is in the way he makes bacon pancakes in the morning while Finn is still asleep. It is in the way he meets Lady every day at 4 in the afternoon, not because he has to, but because she is the reason he wants to be somewhere specific at a specific time. It is in the way he sits in a collapsing wall and narrates the life of a rabbit to an entire land that stops to listen. It is in the way he throws worn ampersand into a black hole without hesitation when his children are threatened. It is in the way he says different but the same to his own reflection and means it completely. What Jake teaches us, if you spend enough time with him, is something about the relationship between flexibility and identity. The idea that being able to change, to stretch, to shift, to take different shapes depending on what the moment needs, does not mean having no self. The idea that the self is not a fixed form, but an ongoing process, a consistency of character that runs through all the changes and survives them and is maybe even enriched by them. He teaches us something about love being an outward orientation rather than an inward one. Love as the decision to care more about the people around you than about your own comfort. Without this meaning, you sacrifice yourself. Jake does not sacrifice himself. He does not martyr himself. He is, in fact, remarkably good at being comfortable. The secret is that his comfort comes from the people around him, not from the protection of himself from those people. He is comfortable because he is loved. He is loved because he loves. The math is simple. He teaches us something about the specificity of joy. Jake is not a person who experiences happiness in vague, generalized terms. His joys are specific. Bacon pancakes, a good viola session with Lady, Finn laughing at something he said, a particularly comfortable cloud, a new food he has not tried yet, the moment when a stuck door finally opens and the dungeon is right there. He does not hold out for grand transcendent experiences. He collects the small ones. He notices them. He takes them seriously as sources of genuine pleasure without requiring them to be anything more than what they are. This is a form of wisdom that looks simple but is not. Most of us, in practice, are bad at receiving small joys. We experience them with half our attention while the other half is on something else, on what we need to do next, on whether the joy is sufficient, on what it might mean. Jake is all the way in the small joy, fully present in the moment of the good thing happening, which is what makes the good thing actually good. A bacon pancake that you are only halfway paying attention to is not the same experience as a bacon pancake that has your complete and delighted focus. He teaches us something about mortality, about how the only people who are truly at peace with death are the people who have been truly present for their lives, who have paid attention, who have been where they were, who have invested fully in the relationships and the moments that made up their days. Jake is at peace with death because he has not wasted his life avoiding discomfort or protecting himself from loss. He has been in it. He has stretched himself out into every experience, every relationship, every warm moment. When it is time to go, there is nothing left undone that he cannot leave undone. And he teaches us something about the inherited strangeness of being alive. About the fact that none of us knows exactly where we come from. Not all of it. Not the deepest and strangest parts. Jake does not know for most of his life that he is half alien, half something ancient and shape-shifting and extra-dimensional. He does not know that the mud puddle story is not the truth. And when he finds out the truth, he does not shatter. He does not need to rebuild. He just folds the new information into the existing person he is and keeps going. Because what makes him Jake is not his genetics. It is not his origin story. It is not the creature who bit his father in a dark wood. It is the choice made over and over every single day to be present, to be loving, to be flexible, to be here. There is a reason the show gave Jake the specific power set that it did. Infinite physical flexibility maps onto infinite emotional flexibility. The ability to take any shape maps onto the ability to meet any situation. The inability to hold a fixed form. If Jake stops paying attention, if he lets his concentration drift, if he forgets to be himself for a moment, the shape slips. Maps onto the constant, active choice that being a good person actually requires. You do not stay good by being good once. You stay good by choosing it, continuously, as a daily practice, as the ongoing project of your existence. Jake makes that choice. Every single day, across every episode, across the long arc of a show that gave him a decade to develop and be seen. He makes the choice to be flexible, to love, to show up, to find the small joys and take them seriously, to face the big things without pretending they are bigger than they are. To be, in the end, the warmth at the center of things, the steady note that makes everyone else's harmony possible. The treehouse is gone, the pups are grown and have pups of their own. Finn outlived Jake by years and still carried him, always in the tattoo on his arm, and the habits built over a lifetime together. And Jake went to Nirvana, the 50th dead world, the highest rung of whatever the afterlife is in the land of Ooh. He went there because he earned it. Not through heroics, though he was heroic. Not through sacrifice, though he sacrificed. But through the accumulated weight of a life spent fully, lovingly, flexibly in the world. He is up there somewhere now, in the warm gold light of the place where peace lives. Probably not doing anything in particular, probably just being there, in the specific Jake way of being completely present in a place without needing the place to be anything other than what it is. And when Finn showed up, he came down. Because of course he did. To keep making bacon pancakes in the morning while the person he loves most sleeps upstairs, and the world outside is full of strange things, and to turn it into a song, and to mean the song completely. Bacon pancakes. Making bacon pancakes. Take some bacon, put it in a pancake. Bacon pancakes. That's what it's going to make. Somewhere in the land of Ooh, Jake the dog is lying on a cloud. He is not asleep. He is not exactly awake. He is being exactly what he is. And everything for the moment is exactly fine. If you made it all the way to the end of this, thank you. Really. Drop a comment and tell me what your favorite Jake moment was. Mine changes every time I think about it. And if you are not subscribed to Dozing Off Time yet, this is the moment. Jake would want you to. He would be very relaxed about asking, but he would want you to. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and come back soon. There are so many more stories left in Ooh, and we will tell them all together. Take care of yourselves. Sleep well. And remember, different but the same.